Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Axon Health. Today, we wanted to talk about the basics of exercise because we feel that there are a lot of people that may watch this video or subscribe to our channel that don't know the basics of exercise. And because I sometimes just seem to talk at this higher exercise physiology terminology level, some people might not understand what I'm talking about. So today I wanted to talk about some concepts, some basic principles about exercise physiology, then how to structure a basic workout, what the evidence shows right now for beginners, what to focus on, and so forth. So, a couple of things we're going to talk about is, so I always say the word hypertrophy. Hypertrophy, and what does that mean? So that is the enlargement of an organ or tissue by its muscle cells, okay? The next part I'm not going to talk about in this video, but hypertrophy, so enlargement of an organ or tissue, has three components. Mechanical tension, so how much tension is on the muscle, okay? Metabolic stress, which is another word for the pump. That's as far as I'm going to go into detail. And then muscle damage, so the actual micro trauma that's occurring when you're actually doing an exercise. And then remember, you don't grow in the gym, you grow outside the gym. So the gym is breaking down muscle fibers, getting a pump, anoxia, lack of oxygen, and a bunch of other stuff. So that is an important factor. So then we have strength, which is basically how much force you can exert against an object. And then power, which is the same thing as strength, but there's also a unit of time involved, which is actually quite funny because they call it power lifting, squat, bench, deadlift meets, but it's actually just strength lifting because there's no time component. So more stuff in CrossFit would actually be power related because there are actually time components. And I have some stuff written down right here just in case I don't forget all my points. A lot of people know that I like to get off topic. So a couple other things that are important. When you're designing an exercise program, you have frequency, common sense, how often you're lifting a movement or doing, say, upper body once a week, twice a week, so forth. Then you have volume. That is the sets and the reps. So how much total weight are you lifting in one workout over a week? Usually, and again, not to get too in depth, when people are looking at proper training volume programs, it's the way you allocate, your volume, so the total amount of weight you're lifting over a whole entire week. Not so much per day. And we'll talk about that in another intermediate to advanced video, which I will do. Then we have intensity. What does intensity mean? Intensity means how close are you lifting to your 1 rep max? That is what intensity means in resistance training terms. So lifting weights. So if you have a bench press max of 225 and you're lifting at 215 pounds, you're working at arbitrarily a 95% of your true rep max. So you're working at a higher intensity. Okay? And then when you start looking at your program specifics, again, which I won't go into, the more intensity you use in the training block, the more careful you have to be about the volume, the amount of weight that you're actually lifting. Because if you don't take these variables into account, this is when overtraining can happen and other factors, because we talk about fatigue management. Dr. Mike Israetel from RP periodization, very big on fatigue management. So how is your fatigue or tiredness being measured throughout the week? Important stuff. So then we have resistance training, simple terms, exercising. You know, people could have different things, whether it's strength training or hypertrophy training and so forth. Then we have aerobic and anaerobic. So aerobic, cardiovascular, aerobic with oxygen, anaerobic, without oxygen. So more glucose, well, glucose is the primary source. And this is more short bursts. So say high intensity sprint. So you sprint 100 yards, stop for 30 seconds, sprint again. Anaerobic, HIIT cardio, if you ever heard the term HIIT cardio. Aerobic cardio is, say, it's always usually low to moderate intensity, say 60% of your maximum heart rate going for 45 minutes on the treadmill. Very simple terminology. Okay, so I wanted to cover those basic terms because I think it's really important to cover some of these things since some people don't know what these words mean, and it's important. So when you're creating an exercise program and I just call it exercise. That's everything, whether it's you want to do calisthenics or cardio and so forth. When you're creating an exercise program for someone and they don't know what they're doing, you got to start at the basics, because that builds the foundation in the simplest sense to progress over years of training and, keeping injury risk down and optimizing the goals that you want to have. So like I said, structuring programs is specific. You'll have beginners, intermediates, and advanced. And not again to go too much into depth, but each one of these groups, if you fall into them, proper intelligent training. There's no direct guidelines. It's not like, if you've been lifting weights for 5 years intelligently with a good program, you're in advance. It's different. It's subjective. But the more advanced you are, typically, the more diversity or the more complexity or the more volume, different types of training schemes, depending on what you want to do. A beginner can get away with a lot better progress with just, say, having 3 full body days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So another thing to talk about real quick is failure. Very simply, you do not need to train to full failure, especially if you're a beginner, and if failure is a tool. You don't need to overtrain with failure, because failure has its benefits, especially for intermediate to advanced athletes. If you're an advanced professional bodybuilder, failure more than likely will need to be utilized more than, say, in a beginner. A lot of beginners want to go into the gym and just lift to failure all the time, and this can be problematic in the long run. We'll just leave it at that. Last, before we get into structuring a beginner program, deloads. Very important. Now, the research is out. Does a ranked beginner need to take a deload? And a deload is taking it back for a week or two. If you're feeling beat up, just not feeling well, you're getting weaker in the gym, maybe change a couple things. If that's not working, could be time for a deload. Some people take structured deloads. I take structured deloads in my programming. Some people don't need to, Beginners might be able to go 10 to 12 weeks. Why is that? Because they're not utilizing failure as much. They're not using as much volume. Remember the amount of weight you're lifting throughout the week. It's different for a beginner. So deloads will come, but they might not be necessary for a beginner. And there is no true research to say you need a deload at this time. Some professionals take deloads every 5th week. Some take them every 8th week and so forth, or depending on how they feel, called auto-regulating on how you feel. So those are the basic concepts I wanted to talk about. And there's a lot more, but I think that's a good starting place. So, how do you structure a good exercise routine? This is hard to say. How many days do you need in the gym? Also hard to say. So from all the research I've read over 10 years, put into practical application, this is what I think is the most optimal for a ranked beginner. 3 days a week, maybe 4. Full body movements. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, a day off in between, and then one of them you'll have 2 days off. Cardio once or twice a week, total different story. Again, cardio is a tool. Not to get off topic, if you're using cardio specifically as the main form of fat loss, you will lose and create some other problems, which I'm going to talk about in future videos. So anyway, full bodies 3 days a week is a great place to start. You have a couple primary movement patterns. So you have a squat pattern and a hinge pattern. Different. Lots of research out there in articles. Just type in squat versus deadlift. I see a lot of people squatting their deadlifts. You look that up, you'll see what I'm talking about. You have a horizontal pressing movement. My chest is so sore. Okay, you have a vertical pressing movement. Okay, and a couple other ones. A pull-up could be considered another one. But you have these primary movement patterns. Learning these basic movement patterns is absolutely key. And because there's so many people out there that don't know how to perform these movements properly, I always send people, if they want to watch something quick, Jeff Nippard on YouTube, my opinion, the best. Great guy from what it seems like. And just great educational videos. He did a technique series, Tuesday series, where he did a different exercise every single week for a year. Went over the research, broke it down. He's a professional natural powerlifter and bodybuilder, knows his stuff. So great place to look at how to actually perform movement patterns. And that's really important because if you don't know how to properly engage your scapulas, the two muscles right here, your shoulder blade muscles, and you don't know how to properly push through the ground on a deadlift or how to properly engage your glutes, it can really be problematic. And that is I can't stress this enough on if you don't know how to do these basics and you start going into intermediate advanced programs because we don't have the patience, this can be very problematic in the long term. So 3 days a week, maybe a movement pattern on a frequency of every other workout. So you're doing a movement pattern every 5 days, so about 1.3 frequency a week. Or you could do, a pressing movement on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But then you have to be careful about, again, if you're a ranked beginner, how you're allocating that volume. Are you doing 4 sets of a press Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then 4 sets of a horizontal press, and then 4 sets of a vertical press Monday, Wednesday, Friday? You're now at 24 sets, can't do math, 24 sets just on a horizontal and vertical press. So 12 sets each. So finding someone that knows how to allocate this specifically is going to be vital to your success. You're probably going to have to go to a bunch of people because a lot of people just will have you doing all these crazy workouts. And again, there's nothing wrong with that in a sense, but if your goal is to actually optimize your performance, you'll want to find someone who knows what they're talking about. So that's important. Then after you do that, so let's say you put those movement patterns in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, what order do you want them in? So hard to say. If you're lifting full body Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I usually start with lower body first. You don't have to, okay? People say bigger compound movements come first. It depends on your goals, okay? Whether you're hypertrophy driven, if your goal, but remember, as you're a ranked beginner, you're not going to have like maybe the most specific goal that say I have or an advanced lifter or something like that. You're just trying to learn those basic movements. You're not utilizing failure probably at all for a little bit. I do not recommend going to failure when you don't understand the movement patterns. That is super, super important. I don't recommend that you take a deload right away because you probably don't need it. You're not training to failure. You don't have that much volume. So more than likely you don't need a deload. Cardio. This is so in the air. You got to do what you want to do. By the way, if you don't enjoy what you're doing and you don't adhere to it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So enjoy what you're doing. What are you going to stick with? That is one of the most important things when it comes down to an exercise program. So I can only tell you what I enjoy, okay? Again, you have to think about your goals. If your goal is to strictly put on as much muscle as possible, you might want to be careful with how much cardio you're doing. You don't want to overuse cardio because, again, it's a tool. Now, if your goal is to be a long distance runner, you have to run. It's specific to your goal. Strength is a skill. If you want to get better at being strong, you have to practice at getting strong. It's another big misconception. People think that you don't have to train for strength if you want to get your 1 rep max up. Not true. So a lot of misconceptions in this field. Anyway, so enjoy what you do. I like hiking. I weighted vest, new thing I started doing because I've been here for a year now, so I think I can do some 9-10 mile hikes in the mountains with a weighted vest. We'll see. First one's tomorrow. Might die. So, but enjoy what you're doing. I don't really suggest that people use treadmills really because I think there's a lot of better options out there. Now, mind you, again, if your goal is to preserve muscle mass, you need to be careful on the cardio tools you use or strength. But if you're just trying to be in shape or you're doing CrossFit, oh man, you got all sorts of options. Running, biking, swimming, all sorts of stuff. Not saying you can't do this stuff on a hypertrophy-based program. You just have to be a little bit more conscious about your goals. So cardiovascular activity is very important. A lot of people say if you do cardio, you're going to lose muscle. That's absolutely a ludicrous black and white statement. And research actually shows that doing cardio appropriately helps with muscle hypertrophy. So there's some articles on that. I use Mass Research Review with a member for 2 years now, I think. Great review for exercise science. I wouldn't recommend that to a beginner because the terminology they speak in tends to be in the intermediate to advanced level. This is why I made this video. It was my wife's idea. Because I'll just talk about, remember how we went back to hypertrophy, the 3 components? I would talk about metabolic stress for 30 minutes and how that works physiologically speaking, and the research on that. But that doesn't matter to a beginner. It's cool if you want to know it, but you got to start with the basics. Because, like I said, a lot of people don't want to start with the basics. They want the gains now. And if you're a ranked beginner, research is pretty clear. You're going to put on some lean body mass pretty quick. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. 15 minutes, keep it at that. Basics of exercise physiology. So remember, I went over some terminology. I went over what I thought was a basis of how to structure a good muscle hypertrophy program or a strength program or a general health program. Just to finish it off, everything comes down to specificity. What is your goal in the gym? Do you want to gain muscle? Do you want to be strong? Do you want to have a mixture? Do you want to have power? Do you want to be a CrossFitter? Do you want to be a gymnast? Those things are important. But in the very beginning, if you haven't been to the gym for years or never been, learning those movement patterns are absolutely vital to your success in all other aspects of life. Without that good foundation, it's hard to keep yourself injury-free and so forth in the long run. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day.